Hello, my name is Robert Bell. I am Executive Director of the Space and Satellite Professionals International. Welcome to Making Leaders, a series of conversations with people who are leaders of this fast-changing industry and who are helping to forge a new generation of leaders to take us into the future. Our Making Leaders series of interviews Leaders series of interviews is made possible by a grant from Korn Ferry, which provides executive search, leadership development, and data on engagement and compensation to companies around the world, including many in our industry. And we're also grateful for the continuing financial support for our mission from SSPI sponsors Arianespace, Boeing, Planet, and SSL. And today we welcome the President and Chief Operating Officer of SpaceX, Gwynne Shotwell. Gwynne became President and Chief Operating Officer in 2008 after achieving remarkable success as the company's Vice President of Business Development, who led the effort to build the Falcon vehicle manifest over 50 launches worth $5 billion in revenue. As president, she's responsible for day-to-day operations and for managing the customer and strategic relationships that support company growth. And under her leadership, SpaceX's backlog has grown to more than $7 billion of launches, while achieving a set of truly remarkable milestones, the latest of which I can only call a ballet of rocket power, when the Falcon Heavy launch on February 6th finished with the side-by-side touchdown of two first-stage rockets on their landing pads. Gwynne, welcome to the program.
Thanks very much, Robert.
Now, it's been a remarkable couple of years for you and your company. On the personal level, SSPI announced your induction into the Space and Satellite Hall of Fame on January 24th, where you join industry legends from Dr. Harold Rosen to Renee Anselmo. And then on February 12th, our friends at Via Satellite joined in naming you Satellite Executive of the Year. So really, I think you can just plan to coast for the rest of your career.
Yeah, that wouldn't be like me, but certainly it's been great. We've had an extraordinary run for about a year, and it's just nice for the company to get the recognition.
Well, absolutely, and long may it continue. But let's step away from today's triumphs for a moment and talk about the road that got you here. Could you tell us what your early years were like?
Happy to. I actually was very interested in cars as a very young person. I remember we lived kind of out in the country. By the way, is this how far back you wanted to go, or did you?
Oh yeah, we want to know the story that got you here, which is I'm sure a winding road.
Okay, so we lived kind of out in the boonies, we referred to it, and so I spent a lot of time in the car with my mom driving us around, and I couldn't figure out how in the world a car worked. And I asked her, I remember I was in third grade, and I said, how does a car work? And she's an artist. She was an artist. She passed away a couple of years ago, but she had no idea, and so she bought me a book. And I actually need to dig through all the old stuff, because I bet that book is somewhere. So she bought me a book on how cars worked, and so I read it, and I was pretty interested, and but didn't chase them really at all as a child. My mother tried to convince me that I should be an engineer. I didn't know what that was, other than the guy on the train. And so she took me to a Society of Women Engineers event when I believe I was a sophomore in high school, and I met a number of women who kind of took their Saturdays to explain to a auditorium full of young women and girls what it was like to be an engineer. And I had the opportunity to chat one-on-one with the mechanical engineer that was there, and I loved what she was doing. She had owned her own company, innovating on construction materials, green construction materials, and was fascinated by what she did. And she was a mechanical engineer, and so I decided to be a mechanical engineer that day, actually, and never wavered from it. But really, a critical part of my decision that day was not just because I liked her and she was smart and I liked what she was doing, but she had the best suit on, and she had great shoes, and her bag matched her shoes, and that's what a 15-year-old girl was impressed by, in part.
And I think that is a wonderful story. I just love that story.
I'd like to tell that story because, we're all trying to figure out how to get non-traditional people into the engineering field. And so I think you got to go look at the stories of non-traditional people entering engineering and figuring out why they got there. And yeah, it was actually during an interview when I realized that that's why I decided to be an engineer. And then now I talk about it a lot, because if that's what gets young women into engineering, then great. I'm happy to be a part of that, because this woman had a great suit.
Now, tell me, does that influence your dress choices every day?
So I recall her suit as being far more conservative than the things that I normally wear, but I do think, yes, I do spend a bit of time thinking about what I'm wearing. Yeah.
Very good for you. Okay, so you obviously, you and Mr. Musk have built a company made up of some amazing young innovators. We get to see them screaming their heads off with joy every time you guys achieve a milestone. How does the background you just described influence how you lead today, do you think?
Interesting. Tying my background. So okay, so let's chat a little bit about that. In college, my undergraduate degree was in mechanical engineering. My master's is in applied math, which is basically engineering analysis. But I had a minor in economics, econ. So I think my engineering degree tied with my interest in economics, and with the fact that I was a cheerleader in high school, and that's going to sound weird, like how in the world is this at all relevant? I think those pieces kind of formed my perspective on what kind of an engineer I am. I am the corporate cheerleader for SpaceX. I am the cheerleader for my employees. I'm the cheerleader for the team that's struggling trying to get stuff done. So I think those pieces are what drive my day-to-day interactions with folks. I do think it's important in a company like SpaceX to have deeply technical roots. It's just easier to hang and understand the issues that you face day to day. And I try to be very positive. I found myself actually, not last year, but like in 2015 and 2016, as you know, we struggled pretty mightily here. And I think I lost a little bit of my optimism and my positive outlook, but it's back. So important to have true.
Well, I think that's a very interesting distinction to make, because in this field of space and satellite, we don't spend very much time talking about this. But basically, SpaceX is from the very beginning just try to tackle big, hairy, audacious, really impossible challenges, and you continue to set your sights really high. And I think that having somebody whose self-description is the cheerleader for both the people who are succeeding and the people who are struggling, I think it's a pretty powerful role you've designed for yourself.
You know, it sounds really good the way you said
it. Well, good. Then, so you feel free to steal that and use it elsewhere. So there you were. You've developed all these educational qualifications through a lot of hard work, and I know how hard engineering programs are. Did that tell you as you graduated what it is you wanted to do? Did you say someday I want to build rockets and make sure that humanity gets off this marvelous rock we're on?
Good question. I went into the automotive industry right from my undergraduate degree. It was a pretty extraordinary program. It was called the Chrysler Institute of Engineering, and they hired me. It was a management training program, and I was to rotate in like every 6 months into a new job. I think it was every 6 months into a new job while I was working on my master's degree in mechanical engineering at University of Michigan. And I loved it. There was a class, like every year there was an incoming class of, I don't remember exactly, 12 to maybe 25 people. Maybe it was as large as 25. So we were a pretty tightly knit group. And I got to see a lot of the company, Chrysler, at that time. By the way, this was in the mid 80s. I started in 1986. And my first job was over the summer. They sent me to auto mechanic school because I actually didn't have any experience with cars. And so me and the dudes were at Motec. It was called Motec. And I'll never forget, I showed up the first day at Motec in cropped jeans and little white tennis shoes. And the guys that were there with me were in giant steel-toed boots and grubby jeans and t-shirts. They were ready to work on cars, and I was completely unprepared. I do remember the instructor making fun of me, making me stand in front of the class, like pointing out how ridiculous I was. But that's a good learning experience. I I didn't dress the same way the next day. I came with a pair of boots and I was ready to work, and I learned how to hone engine cylinders, do valve jobs, rebuild transmissions. It was extraordinary. It was an extraordinary experience, and I got along with my classmates really well. And by the way, these were not engineers. I was there with people learning how to become auto mechanics. There was no one else in my class that was an engineer. So I was there on my own. I think I was the only girl too, as I recall. But that never really has mattered to me. But anyhow, that was my first thing to do out of college. And when I went and started directly with Chrysler, one of the things that I learned very early on is Chrysler was a group of people at the time, and I don't think it's the same now, but they were hiring out all what I considered to be really interesting engineering programs. And so the Chrysler engineers at the time were really project managers. And I didn't feel equipped enough to manage a project because I hadn't done anything yet. I hadn't engineered anything yet. And so my naive self said, oh, okay, well, I can't manage a project because I haven't been an engineer yet. I better go back to school and get my PhD, and then I can be an engineer. This was just all me trying to figure it out on my own. And so I did go back to Northwestern, where I got my undergrad degree and entered into a PhD program in applied math. And I figured after my PhD in applied math, I would be a great engineer and be able to go out and do great engineering work. But after about 6 months of that, I recognized how broke I was. I was on fellowship, but I recognized that I liked working and having a paycheck as opposed to being a student. So I left Northwestern after a year, not with a PhD, but with a master's degree in applied math. And I came out to Los Angeles and worked for the Aerospace Corporation. I was there for almost exactly a decade. My first day was Halloween in 1988, and I left in October of 1998, but I don't think I quite made it to Halloween. And aerospace was a great experience. I still felt like I knew nothing, but I learned a huge amount while I was there. I had the opportunity to kind of go deep on a number of subsystems. I was a thermal control engineer and analyst, developed thermal models of a bunch of different satellite programs, Milstar, GPS, and others. And then I worked towards being a chief engineer of a satellite program in the Space Test Program.
Now, was that chief engineer job the first time you actually had a role, being responsible for managing people, or did that come to you earlier?
So I had not, even at my role as chief engineer, I did not manage people there. I would manage the project. And so people reported to me from a project perspective, but I didn't supervise anybody. My first supervisor's role was actually when I left aerospace over a decade later, I was at aerospace for a decade. And then when I went to Microcosm, I took over a small group of space systems engineers there. I think there were 6 or 8 people that reported to me. So that was my first supervisor experience. I had always, probably after the first 3 or so years at aerospace, I was always the team. I was a part of a team, and then pretty vocal part of the team, relatively organized, and so I just kind of bubbled up to be team leaders on the teams that I was working. And so I think it was kind of natural for me to end up managing people, but it was not a job that was handed to me. It definitely kind of fomented over time.
Well, so, and it's such a transition in life when you go from being responsible for your work and you go to then being a member of a team where you're the leader, but no, you're not quite accountable in that way to finally where you become accountable for results. Can you tell us about an early leadership lesson for you?
That wasn't on your list of questions. That's a really good question. Early leadership.
Well, thank you. I wish I'd put it on there.
Without giving much away, early in my career as a manager, we one of the things that's hardest to do as a manager is have to counsel employees who aren't doing great work. And I recall struggling mightily with how to do that. This engineer was very senior to me and was just not producing. And so we had to counsel out that employee, or I had to counsel out that employee. And that was hard. I think that was probably my hardest thing as a manager, really probably in the first few years, actually.
It's interesting. I agree with you. It is probably the toughest thing to do because you can all see where it's going, but you need to treat that person with respect and make it the best experience you can for you and the organization.
Yes.
If you're just joining us, this is Robert Bell of the Space and Satellite Professionals International. Our program is Making Leaders, and I'm speaking with Gwynne Shotwell, the President and Chief Operating Officer of SpaceX, about her career and the lessons that she has learned from it. Gwynne, let me just rotate to a slightly different topic, which is about your job now, among which your many duties is about hiring people. So let's say you had just 5 minutes for whatever reason to interview someone. What would you ask that person?
So I'm very consistent, and so everybody who wants to apply to SpaceX is going to get the secret. Employees who are successful at SpaceX had success in their past. So I always ask, give me an example or two of when you have done great work. You personally, not led a team, but you personally do great work. And I dig in on the responses. And that's so the things that are critical to being a great employee at SpaceX is obviously, as I said, you have to have had success before. I think if you've had success and you've tasted success, it's easier to have success in a company like SpaceX. Want really smart people. Experience is not the thing that is most valued at SpaceX. It's energy level and motivation level and intelligence. If you're smart and you're motivated, you will figure out a problem. You will find the right answer. Experience can be helpful, but experience, especially if you're in an innovative company, industry experience can actually be, to some extent, a downfall. One of the worst things you can say at SpaceX is, when asked a question, why are we doing it this way, is, well, that's the way we've always done it. Like, that is the death sentence on the idea or on that process.
And that's, by the way, that applies every place. As soon as you hear that, you realize, oh, there is no reason.
Right. Yeah. Or the person that said it doesn't know what the reason is, which is a big problem.
Let me ask you, why at Space, you made a point of saying that at SpaceX, it's really a good idea if you have a success in your background, but sort of particularly at SpaceX. Why is that? So
the demands on employees here it's pretty strong. People work really hard here, and it can be a difficult environment. Like, not only are we innovating on our products, but we have to launch successfully, and it used to be once a month, and now it's a couple times a month. So there's just so much going on. People are moving incredibly quickly that maybe employees who have not felt success, not felt it or experienced it firsthand, could potentially get a little bit lost, I think, in the fast pace here. So it's important. And I also think, success breeds confidence, and confidence is a great way, not confidence without humility, but confidence is a great way to be motivated, stay motivated, and continue on and do great things. Even when, there might be chaos around you, or things might be incredibly busy and a million things are happening at once. I think confidence is really important, and confidence comes from mastery, and mastery generally comes from success.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It reminds me of a line from Walter Scott at Digital Globe, who said in an acceptance speech actually for the Hall of Fame last year, said, the interesting thing about this whole business is that you push a button and it either goes up or it blows up. And that's, quite a thing. Unlike software, for instance, it may blow up, but somehow it's not quite the same.
Yes, this is a very, very difficult business, both technically as well as from a business perspective. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so just let me ask you a specific question. You mentioned, experience is not necessarily the first thing you look for, although obviously some kind of success it comes from experience. What is your advice for new college grads who ask the classic question, I'm really interested in space, I've studied engineering, or I've studied law that relates to it, or I've studied marketing, and I really think this is where I want to work. What do I do? How do I find what's the right place for me, and how do I make myself appealing to an employer?
So I think it's important to ask that question before you graduate. I think hopefully freshmen are thinking about, and frankly, I think students are so extraordinary these days that I think like eighth graders are thinking about success now. But what's really important is, I said, demonstrate excellence is critical to coming into SpaceX. And part of demonstrating excellence is on some sort of relevant project, although it doesn't always have to be. You could have had success doing a project in school that was not hands-on and engineering-ish, but you still had success. But we encourage the students that we work with to get hands-on experience, join teams, Formula SAE, Solar Car, basically join teams, learn hands-on, get hands-on experience and push that team to success.
Right, and
So
that's absolutely, yeah. And SSPI, among other things, runs research competitions with a couple of organizations, many of whose members are on this line right now, called the Students for the Exploration and Development of Space in various places. And it's exactly what you're talking about. It's get into this thing, dig in, achieve success. And the students I interview walk away very proud.
Yes, it's really important to feel success. And I think that's incredibly motivating for people to go on and do even greater things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned the difficulty of counseling an employee who's not performing as a key leadership challenge you faced. What are some of the sort of lessons you think you've learned from managing people in an extremely competitive and difficult environment? What if you were asked to give the leadership speech, what are some of the points that you'd make?
Provide immediate feedback, objective feedback. Don't let things wait. If you can catch an issue in the moment and have the employees see it and recognize it, it's so much easier to address the behavior or address the issue. Frankly, when I have employees who aren't doing great, I take it personally. Like, it's my fault. I did not have the time to manage and mentor. So, I mean, that's another lesson of leadership. Your employees are a reflection of your ability to manage and lead them. And so managers should feel a personal failure when you have to counsel out employees. I think that's critically important. And that doesn't mean you hang on to people that you can't get turned around. But to some extent, it is the manager's fault.
You spoke
to a large extent.
You spoke earlier about just the drive, the pace, about going through a period, the previous couple of years that were really difficult for the company. What about leading through challenging times when everyone's looking to you to be the cheerleader, perhaps, or to indicate to help them get through those times?
So it's really important, first of all, to stay positive. And after the issue we had in 2015, I still was very positive. I knew we would figure it out and get through it. So I think staying positive, but also directing people to do the work. So if you have a standard process for addressing an issue, I think it's really important to turn people to that process and just start executing. Try to get people focused on understanding, analyzing, and fixing as opposed to lamenting. So I think I did a much better job in 2015 on that than I did in 2016. I was pretty devastated by the event we had on September 1st, and I was less positive, and thus I think less effective. It was a much more difficult problem to find as well, and so I think a number of folks here at SpaceX were kind of losing heart, not in the business, but just we got to figure this out and we got to go address it. So Yeah, but it's important as a leader, if there's an issue, focus people on executing and not lamenting. You always want to
Now,
look back and figure out what the lesson learned is, but you really want to get people working.
absolutely, absolutely. But now there's a nuance to that. I just wanted you to talk about that for 1 minute, which is you also need to be emotionally honest about the fact that things are not going well, right? Sometimes when we're in trouble, the last thing we want to hear is a cheery speech about how everything's great.
Yeah, although I think there's a difference between just being genuine and worried and being kind of cranky. I think I was cranky. Yeah, I was not my best self after that event.
Well, you get one of those in your career, so it's all right. So you've used it up.
Yeah, I have used it up. Thank you. Yes.
Why do you think that employees at SpaceX can be proud of the work that your company does? What is it that they carry around with them that really makes them proud?
So there's two parts to that. I don't think that there is very many. There always can be a few, but there are not very many employees at SpaceX who don't feel a real part of what we're doing. We're pretty focused. And so it's not like some companies where the companies have a scope of, hundreds of different products or processes or services. Everybody knows at SpaceX what we're doing and how they fit in. I think a great example actually is the staff that works in our restaurant. They are a critical part of our execution. We work in an area where there is not a lot of restaurants in the area. You have to go pretty far out. And so to have a place here where employees can have a great meal in a 10 or 15-minute lunch instead of having to drive 20 minutes, have lunch, drive 20 minutes back. And these folks they know what we're doing. They're super motivated. They're right outside of mission control, so they see what's going on. They know, and they're part of it, and they feel a part of it. And so, if your restaurant staff can feel a part of a mission of building rockets and launching customers and ultimately taking people to Mars, then I think you probably have the right approach as far as vision. Yeah.
And what's the other half?
The other half. Oh, so people know what we're doing. They know how they fit in. And hopefully we give them the opportunity to do great work. It's another part of my job as a leader, is to clear the path of frustrations, daily frustrations, hourly frustrations, so that people can feel like they are doing their job and not dealing with the chaff and the garbage and the yuckiness of a day. So they get to contribute. Every employee gets really to contribute. We don't have a lot of, even our managers do the work of their teams. They don't just manage teams. So I think it's important that everybody contributes in a very direct way, and that is the way it is at SpaceX. Interns do real engineering work at SpaceX. They do real work. What
is the very best part of your job?
Working with my awesome employees, without question. When I get to meet with my customers, I love that as well. I have the greatest job, right? I'm working for an incredible leader, Elon, with an extraordinary team that has done ridiculously outlandish and crazy and never anyone could have conceived work. And I've got an incredible set of customers who are like genuinely nice people, and they're excited about our success. And I love working with them too. Yeah, I have a great job.
You do have a great job.
Yeah.
Like any tech industry, the space and satellite business is driven by the ambition, the knowledge, the passion, and the leadership skills of its people. In our Making Leaders series here, we take time away from business plans and technology roadmaps to focus on the people who make a difference. And I think that certainly describes you, and I'm sure our listeners agree. So, Gwynne, I want to thank you very much for sharing your personal history and your life lessons with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you so much, by the way.
Absolutely. And good luck with the next stages in your adventure there. My thanks once again to Korn Ferry for making this program possible with the additional support of Arianespace, Boeing, Planet, and SSL. We'll be preparing this webinar also as a podcast on our site and divided up into a couple of pieces, so that'll be available for you to share with others. And we look forward to your joining us on our next Making Leaders podcast and webinar. Take care.